all for coming. And as an introduction, I'd like to kindly ask you to introduce yourself in a short sentence. Who are you and what do you do? So, ladies first.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. So my name is Steffi Derry, and I'm a TV presenter and also a political commentator, a political influencer. I've worked in television industry for more than 11 years, and right now I work for Megaphone Center, which is basically a center for conservative voices. So I work there currently as a political commentator and influencer, and we work on promoting right views on social media mainly.
Is it on? How do I... Hello. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Peter Whittle. I run a think tank in London called the New Culture Forum, and we have a very big media presence with YouTube. We have a channel on which we do lots of programs. Prior to that, I was a politician on the London Assembly. I was there for 5 years. You might have heard of Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, and I was fighting against him. And before that, I was in the media for a very long time in England, in television and in print journalism. So that's me. Thank you.
Terrific. Well, I just want to say how delighted I am to be here, and thank you so much for coming out in such sweltering heat, and really delighted to be alongside folks who've got some real experience in the realm of social media and in the wider realm of social action. I also run a think tank out in Madrid, my hometown. It's called Civismo. We're a fusionist think tank, which means essentially that we try to bring together different perspectives from the right, including classical liberals, and conservatives. My background is in economics and public policy, and I just finished a graduate program in political theory in Paris, where I was based for 2 years, and now I'm back in Madrid. Really looking forward to this. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the introductions. All of you are from also online social media and conventional social media as well. So this is why I would like to ask you as the first question, is that there are many misconceptions regarding what actually social media is. So this is why I would like to ask you, do we use properly social media? And if not, what is the actual use for social media?
Well, shall I start? I mean, when it comes to social media, I would include, first of all, YouTube in that, because some people necessarily wouldn't. But I think on the whole, YouTube now and social media is a great, it's a great opportunity, despite all the faults with social media, to get messages out, to get certain views out.
It's okay. I think it's okay.
Is it working? Yes. The problem is that it's in Britain, and I don't know, certainly in Britain, the number of political issues that you can discuss has become very, very narrow. So if you are politically campaigning, for example, if you want to get certain messages out, then things like YouTube or social media generally can become extremely important to you. And that's definitely used in my organization. Because the fact is that I say in the past 10, 15 years, there are certain subjects that the mainstream media simply will not address. They don't address, or if they do, it's in a certain way. And it's very frustrating. It's one of the reasons why people, at least in Britain, have lost a lot of faith in the BBC, for example, and the other channels too. So we thank goodness, we thank God for social media in many respects, and particularly YouTube. I would say one thing: if you want to get your messages out, whether it's campaigning, whether you're building some kind of movement, whatever you're doing, there's no harm in trying to imitate the style of the mainstream media. I think that that's good, because there is always this kind of sense in which social media should be slightly kind of, how shall I put it, amateurish, it should be spontaneous. Yes, that's true, but at the same time, I think you should also take the production values that you get in mainstream media as much as you can, imitate them in that sense, to give yourself authority and to give yourself legitimacy. But I think it's very important, yes.
Yeah, I think we have to define what do we mean under properly using social media. Because, for me, using properly social media means that I look through the news, I'm interested in other influencers or journalists' opinions, so I constantly look for those kinds of things and entertainment online. Whereas maybe for someone else, using properly social media would mean that I want to see beautiful pictures, I want to see people who are traveling to nice places. So I think this is number one, that we need to define what does it mean. Obviously, there are good sides and bad sides of using social media. I think we can all agree on that. I've watched an interview with Elon Musk recently, and he said that everybody should delete their Facebook account. And why? Simply because many times it occurs stress and it causes stress and bad feelings in people when they're just looking at the pictures, because everybody would like to show a better him or herself online. So they post nicer pictures, they look happier on social media platforms than they really are in real life. So I think you have to keep a good balance when you are using it, or whatever you use it for. And if you can find this balance, probably, I would say, you can use it properly. And also you have to take care of what you post, because you also have to keep a balance on that, not when you're just using as a person, as a user, but also when you produce content. Because, again, there is a danger that you might forget about how to use it properly, if you understand what I mean. So if you post something which is probably inappropriate or doesn't make sense from your point of view or from your brand, then probably, again, you're not using it properly.
I just wanted to maybe start by rattling off a few facts and figures that I think are going to be helpful in grounding the conversation. Kepios, which is a strategic consultancy, has estimated that as of July this year, so literally this month, there are 4.7 billion social media users on Earth. This amounts to 59% of the world's population and 75% of the world's eligible population. As you know, some platforms restrict use depending on age. Some ban those simply the under 18s. Others are set for the over 13. So it really depends. But really, the social media is, as any advertising company or even any politician would acknowledge, is ubiquitous in our lives, and that's why it plays such a central role in politics and entertainment. Now, I think you asked a really interesting question, which is, what is social media for? And I think one way to answer that question is, what is it being used to do? And some of the data that we have, again, from Kepios, shows that entertainment, filling spare time, are the topmost uses for social media. Those are the uses that users report most often, and reading news stories is third. So I think we really have to keep that in mind to kind of put things in context. Because I think it goes to show the paradox of social media. We have endlessly hailed social media as the global public square, as a megaphone for people, as a way to empower them, to make them politically, to make their views matter in the public space. And I think the reality, though, is that social media is mostly being used for entertainment and social validation. So right there, I think you have a part of the key to understand why social media has failed to meet some of the expectations that were projected for it. I mean, I still remember in 2000, I think this was in 2010, Hillary Clinton gave a speech at Museum, which is a very famous museum in Washington, D.C., where she said that internet freedoms had to be a part of America's global foreign policy agenda, that America had to work to make internet freer worldwide. And I think that really captures the kind of zeitgeist, the mindset of the global ruling class when it comes to the internet, or at least their mindset regarding the internet in the 2010s, when everyone expected that social media was going to liberate the Arab world, or that it was going to ensure that police departments in America were accountable for the abuse they committed on Black Americans. And I think we're way past that. We've begun to see some of the pitfalls and some of the shortcomings of social media. We've seen that social media can also empower authoritarian regimes. It can also spread fake news and disinformation. It's also a recipe for social anxiety and depression. We know that overusing social media platforms is correlated with some of these neuroses and some of these mental illnesses. So I think that kind of captures in a nutshell the paradox of social media, is that, which is why I think your question was very pertinent, is that we have placed some expectations on social media, and we're not getting what we expected.
All of you have outlined the fact that social media has quite negative effects on people's lives. So this is why I would like to point a question to you, Mr. Whittle. As an active media figure, you've seen the change from the institutional media to the user-generated content. And this is why I would like to ask you that, do you think that this shift changed the causes the media pursues for the better or the worse?
At the risk of being repetitive, I think I would say that on a personal level, I think on the whole, social media brings out the worst in people. You know, when you're talking about the extraordinary verbal violence you can get, the way that people sort of angrily disagree now in a way that they wouldn't, become a kind of fighting ground, everything. I try to, on a personal level, keep it to a minimum. But I think there's no question that when it comes to what, compared to what was there before, it has given us opportunities, you know? I mean, for the reasons I said at the beginning, is that with mainstream media, you know, you have a certain width of issues that you can talk about. So, for example, in the UK at the moment, there's almost never programs particularly about immigration, for example, into Britain. If there is, then it will almost certainly come from a certain very liberal perspective. Right? So if you want to put another view about immigration and how maybe it should be tightened, and you want to do it in a reasoned way, and you want an authoritative way, then social media with YouTube, for example, comes into its own. It definitely does. But I think that in terms of usefulness, Twitter on the whole is, shall we say, not good for the mood. The mood, looking at Twitter first thing in the morning is not a good thing to do. For example, I'm on Twitter quite a lot, but you really do see the worst and the most extreme of what people can say, and it's not necessarily very good good for the soul. So I tend to sort of, try to measure what I do with Twitter. But, when it comes to campaigning, I think social media on the whole is absolutely invaluable. It's invaluable, and ask any political party these days. And of course, social media is a massive part of it. It's a massive part. At the same time, you have to be aware that you might be censored, or shadow banned, or any of these things. That happens as well. But I think people are now much more aware of that. But I think on the whole, I would say that, put it this way, in the way that politics is now, particularly in the West, if you didn't have social media, it would be very impoverished, because the level of argument is limited now.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez Galarza, the next question is going to be for you, as Mr. Riddle pointed out that using social media can help in showing other causes than the mass media would like us to show. This is I would like to ask you, as an active media figure publishing podcasts and also in many different media outlets, how do you yourself personally use social media to pursue the causes that you pursue?
Well, I just found Peter's answer tremendously interesting, especially towards the end, because I'm thinking, Peter asked the question, what would politics look like if we all of a sudden took social media away? If social media evaporated, what would the world look like? And, I tend to view that question through the prism of politics. And in politics, so one view would be that if you take social media away, you would be disempowering people, you would be depriving them of a megaphone, you would be silencing their voice. But in reality, what social media is doing is, yes, it does give us a megaphone, but it's also sedating us. It also, for some of the figures that I just gave earlier of the amount of time that we spend on social media, which is 2.5 hours per day on average, 15% of our waking time is spent on social media. So I think that a world where social media is ubiquitous is also a world where the population is, or could be a world where the population is less awoke to injustices or to government malfeasance. So I think that sort of hypothetical, I think, is an interesting one to think about. And as per your question, how should social media be used? I'm reminded of a very interesting book that was published by a Turkish sociologist, Zeynep Turevski. She wrote a book in 2017. It was called Twitter and Tear Gas. And the book was a very interesting one because it showed that social movements have become totally different in the era of social media. She says that there was a sharp cut in the 1990s, after which social movements were never the same. They were totally different from, say, the social movements of the 1960s, because those social movements were hyper-networked. And there's something very interesting in that book where she says, if you're gonna run a social movement today, you don't need any organizing muscle. All you need is a Twitter account and call people to action. Call for a demonstration. This is actually very pertinent in my home country when, I came of age. I'm 27 at the moment. I came of age during the financial crisis in the Eurozone. Right, in 2012, I was in my last year of high school, and that year, all of the Spanish left rallied in the central and kind of really downtown Madrid to demonstrate against the bailouts of the banks and the public corruption in the political class, and that was all brought into action through Twitter. It only took a few Twitter accounts to call people to action, to give them a date and time to show up, and that has totally changed social movements. Now, it's also that's as much a promise as it is a peril, because in the book that I mentioned, in Twitter and Gas, this sociologist says that social movements run the risk of running into what she calls a tactical freeze. Because it has become so easy to spur into action a social movement, those movements are born, a lot of the times they don't even have leaders. And so it's more sort of a nebulous entity that demonstrates for something and then totally evaporates. So that's another one of the dilemmas, I think, facing social movements when it comes to social media. I unfortunately don't have much experience campaigning for stuff on social media. My Twitter following is a paltry 2,000 and something. So if you're looking to follow a Twitter account, I hope to be of interest. But no, I think some of the points that Peter made were incredibly important. I mean, I think you have to appeal to something higher than the baser instincts that we have as human beings. You know, as Steffi was mentioning earlier, social media runs on negative emotions. That's why it polarizes us, because it runs on distrust. It runs on people comparing themselves to one another. It runs on even hate, and that's a huge risk. So my apologies, long story short, I shouldn't have gone for this long, but I think there's really, this is really, it's sort of a shiny object. It's very hard to understand social media. So I hope to have at least helped a little bit.
Thank you for the answer. So the next question is going to be for you, Steffi. Yeah, of course.
You talk about campaigns. Just to give you one example, where social media help. My think tank, we've had a problem in Britain with people wanting to take down statues. You know what I'm talking about here? Historical statues. And we had this discussion with that last. And this caused many people so much anguish, really, including it's a real attack on our history. And so what you do about that, most people who were very, very concerned about it, I'm happy to speak broadly here, were older, should we say. So basically we started a campaign called Save Our Statues. We had a website, right? Of course you have a website. But everything else really came from social media, and in particular, Facebook. Because Facebook is now known as the old, thank you for those of confidence, socialist. I think social media, Facebook is now known as old people's social media. That means anyone over 35, right? But then people could come together on that through our campaign, and we could then tell them, well, this is actually the best way to try to oppose this statue coming down. This is how you do it. This is how you write to a local council. You can use this format if you like, things like that. And it works so well, and we have success in stopping this by giving people the knowledge, and that's where social media can be so important. I just know that that's a very particular example that we had where social media came into its own.
Thank you for the reflection. So combining all this, I'd like to point a question to you, Steffi, is that all of you have pointed the negative effects of social media and also the call to action. How can we mobilize our followers, and having like an influence of people on social media requires people that follow us and trust us. So this is why I would like to point you the question is, how do we gather a following on social media? And if we have a following, how do we mobilize our followers?
Yeah, it's an important question, but let me just share a little bit of my experience as well, because just like Peter, I've also experienced and watched this shift, this change, how social media has changed and how the media itself has changed over the past decade. Because I was working in the public media in 2015, and I started my official Facebook page back in 2015, and it was a big, issue. oh my God, a TV presenter in our company, she just started an official page. Whereas, you know, in the West, it was nothing new. I mean, they already had their pages. It was quite obvious and quite normal that you promote yourself, you promote your show, you start building up a brand for yourself. So basically, in Hungary, they looked at it as kind of a strange thing. Maybe someone who is a little bit big-headed or overconfident, you know, they kind of had this perception, whereas this wasn't the case. So I just wanted to share this because this is how we started, and I'm going to talk about where we are today, but it wasn't easy at first. Obviously, nowadays, it's, you know, it's more common and it's more natural to have your page. Even, you know, hairdressers, all those, anyone can have an official page, and it's not a big deal, really. So going back to your original question, how to gather followers and what to do in order to motivate others, I actually have 3 things in mind. And number 1 is you have to be engagement, because people like to be engaged, so you have to motivate them. They love to get tasks, exercises, they love to be involved. So what I pay attention to is to engage my followers in whatever way I can. Number 2 is the content, which is, I think, very, very important. A good quality of content you need on your page, in your posts, because otherwise they won't really follow you, or you cannot keep up the attention for a long time. And the third thing is authenticity or credibility, so that whatever you do in your private or your professional life, that should be, again, balanced with your social media presence. So whatever you do in your everyday life, you also present it online somehow. So I think, again, you have to pay attention to a good balance. So I would say engagement, a good quality of content, and authenticity. These are the 3 things that, if you keep it in mind, probably you can get more and more followers and they will like you.
Thank you. The 3 of you also mentioned politics on social media. And during the recent elections, we've seen that social media has become one of the strongest tools for a political campaign. But also we've seen that large firms exploit this feature of social media and try to control the reach of the opposing voices. So what do you think is happening on social media with politics? And also, how can we stand against these firms and also use our voice on social media due to the huge opposing forces?
Should I go first? So what's happening between social media and politics? Well, I think to just reiterate one of the points we made earlier, I think social media is at least part of the reason why we are becoming more polarized. In fact, one of the things that I can observe, and anyone can observe in Hungary, that actually reminds me of, for instance, the United States, but also in some respects to Britain, is that all of these countries are growing more polarized when it comes to their politics. People of different opinions are segregating themselves into these silos, right, where all of the information they consume hews to their pre-existing bias, where they only sort of relate to people that confirm those biases. So I think social media has certainly a polarizing effect on politics, and I think that we have to. But another use that it's also having is, for instance, in the realm of electoral politics. Social media allows you, since we're and you just mentioned the effect of corporations on social media. We have to bear in mind that in social media we're not the users. We are the product. The users are the advertisers. We are being sold as a product. Our data is being sold as a product. And that also has a big application, and in fact has totally revolutionized political campaigning. I think Peter can perhaps speak to this point a little more since he's been involved in campaigns, but campaigns run on essentially the data that is collected a lot of the times from social media, and this allows for the campaigns to be very targeted. You can reach a certain section of the electorate with a certain message. You can choose to target your message to the 18-year-olds who favor a ban on tobacco, or whatever. You can come up with your own sort of parameters. So I think that sort of addresses. I think that there's a lot of things that can be said about the intersection between social media and politics. I hope that sort of addresses part of it.
The question focuses more on how can we protect ourselves from large firms like Twitter, Facebook, who are controlling our voices on their platforms.
It's very hard to protect yourself from Facebook and Twitter and all these big global tech companies. I mean, you can see there is really nothing you can do against them. I can again talk about the Hungarian situation. I participated in the online campaign during the elections back in April. Many times Facebook just used censorship. They restricted our accounts. They tried to do everything so that our views and posts and all these conservative voices not to be heard. And one thing that we learned was that whatever is happening, the only thing that you can do is you create your new page. That's the only thing. We did try to think about, certain things, like maybe the government could step in or regulate somehow, but it's impossible. I mean, and just think about, in Hungary, Facebook is basically the #1 social media platform. That's the mostly used social media platform. Out of 10 million Hungarian people, 7 million Hungarians are registered. So that's a huge number. Obviously, in the UK and in the US and in Spain, it's different. Maybe Twitter is more popular or other platforms. But in Hungary, Facebook was the #1 social media platform. So that's where the campaign took place. So basically, if you face with this challenge that you're censored or they try to silence you, the only thing that you can do is with your community, because let's assume that you have a strong community around you, and that's what MegaFund did, that MegaFund gathered all these conservative people and conservative voices so that we could strengthen each other and we could strengthen our each other's pages, for example. So if you're restricted, just create a new page and let's hope for the best. How do you see it, Peter?
Yeah, no. I was just, we've got competition from outside, haven't we? They sound quite good, actually. So
no, we are louder.
Yes, I would go along with that.
They're trying to simulate the tech firms controlling our voices. So
yes, we'll have to work with it. I think we've been, for example, shadow banned, and there are certain issues that come up with the social media companies, which are like triggers, the algorithm or whatever it's called. But I remember that during, for example, the pandemic, we had a program taken down from YouTube because it was we weren't agreeing with it necessarily, but someone was saying this is all a load of rubbish, that basically we shouldn't go. They were lockdown skeptics, should we say. And that was taken down. With YouTube, you get this thing called 3 strikes and you're out, Basically, you're given 3 strikes, and then they'll take your actual channel off, right? And so everyone became super aware of that. There's no other way, basically, you've just got to work within those limits, actually. So that definitely did happen to us. One was taken down. They did put it back up, but then when they put the program back up, they do it in the knowledge that they have effectively killed it. You know, they've killed the momentum of it. And we rely on views, you know, with YouTube, and because it's money from advertising. So I don't know a way around that other than the fact that, you know, we somehow need to break the stronghold of the social media giants, because they all sing from the same hymn sheet. You know, they're all very political. We know that. But unfortunately, we have to work with that as it is at the moment. One thing I'd say, sorry, just to add to that, there is a big downside when it comes to current politics with social media, and this goes particularly for Twitter, and that is the culture of cancelling, cancel culture. That is terrible, because people can lose their jobs. They can, increasingly in Britain, for example, not just celebrities or famous people, people who are at work and they put something on their Twitter, you know, something quite innocuous, you know, and they face possibly being fired for it by their employer, which is actually legal, but they get away with it. You know, cancel culture is almost entirely a product of social media, actually. That's, I'd say, the big negative.
And actually, I just wanted to build on Peter's point. Totally true, by the way. I mean, cancel culture, the way that people get canceled most of the time is through social media. But you also were discussing just off the stage, Peter, and you made a really good point about the effect of social media on journalism and the business of news. And what's happening is that, yes, incredibly high numbers of people are flocking to social media platforms to consume their news. Yes, this is enabling people to be more informed, and yes, this is having a positive effect in terms of democratizing knowledge. But the downside is that the way that those news are consumed, the way that the news is consumed most often is through platforms like Facebook or Twitter, and people generally just read the headline. They barely go in, they rarely click onto the story and read the actual whole report. They have a very surface level sort of understanding of the news. And what also happens is that journalists, because they have to be on social media, because everything is debated and discussed on Twitter, so everyone needs to have a Twitter account, their time is spent replying to one another in tweets of 180 characters instead of actually doing the hard work of journalism, of researching, interviewing, talking to people, being on the ground. And instead, you know, journalists are increasingly being consumed by social media, and that's a big negative impact, I think.
And just one more comment. A good evidence of not to give up and fight and battle online is, for example, the Hungarian elections back in April, because besides the fact that Facebook, you know, tried everything to hinder us, we didn't give up, and basically it was a huge success for Megaphone and the conservative side or community that, you know, 4 years ago, when conservative voices weren't that loud, basically when you opened Facebook, what you could see was only like mainstream and liberal topics and comments and content. Whereas now, when you open your Facebook during the campaign season, you could see, you know, really nice and really good rightist contents, and you could read many articles written by a conservative journalist. So this was a big success for us, and it had a good feeling that we've managed to actually overcome and actually we managed to win over the left liberals.
We need to finish a few minutes earlier, so I'd like to squeeze in a last question in, which is regarding social media. Regarding social media, the fact that it's social, which means that it presents the opportunity for a bilateral conversation. So, how should we exploit the fact that it's available for our users to respond to our message, and how can we use it for our advantage?
No, okay. So basically you're saying how can we best use it, is that what you're saying? We being people who want to campaign or want to put a message out, is that?
Just the fact that social media offers the chance for our viewers to reflect back on our messages, posts, stories. So compared to the original media sources like TV, which does not allow the fact that your viewers can respond to your stories, YouTube videos, and also your tweets.
Well, that's definitely true. I mean, on YouTube, for example, you know, people are absolutely merciless in leaving comments. So if you've got, it's often best not to look at them. No, you didn't get that with the old-style media. You would not know what people thought of your programs or whatever. I just sort of make two general points, if I may, on this general thing, is that, as I said, I started off by saying that if you are trying to campaign, and whether you are increasingly a political party or if you've got a one-off campaign, then about one topic, then there's no question that social media has become a huge help, assistance. I'm sure it must have helped in promoting, for example, this festival in a way that you wouldn't have before, very, very cheaply, because you don't have to advertise. I think what it has done, though, as a negative, is make people's personal relations with each other much rougher. It's made them more abrasive. It's made a battleground of just about every part of our existence, you know. So I think that's the best way I'd like to answer that, really. There are pros and cons, but as you say, there's no point in wishing it away when, did you say 57% of the world or whatever is on social media or something like, it's just
I said, yeah, 7 million Hungarians,
7 million
out of 10 million,
you know,
so that's a huge number.
It's extraordinary. So I think that obviously... one word of advice, though, for aspiring politicians, right? Because we've got a few like this in Britain who have big Twitter followings, massive Twitter followings, and they think that is going to translate into votes. It just doesn't. It's a funny thing. It's really worth remembering. People look and they sort of say, I've got 500,000 Twitter followers, you know, everyone there. No. They go out and they stand for election and they still get only 150 votes. It's the oddest thing. It doesn't. That's just a little postscript there to the discussion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that social media has this freedom that you can start bilateral conversations, and it's really different to the ordinary media, let me put it this way. It's a really good feeling that you have this freedom, but it's also a big responsibility that you can influence other people. You can influence their lives, their political views, whatever you convey. Whatever message. So you have to exploit it in a clever way, I think. So I think what we do, for example, with Megaphone Center, we gather and we offer a really good community, a very nice conservative community where everybody would love to belong to. And so, number one, we not only communicate on Facebook and start discussions and allow our followers to have bilateral conversations, but at the meantime, we also create a very strong conservative community. And I think it's really, really powerful. And I think this is worth to use it that way. Okay, I'm not saying that our political views is not important, because surely it is. We would like to have these discussions with similar minded or similarly thinking people. but it's a really nice feeling that you have this freedom, that you can create a club, and more and more people are joining, and more conservative voices can be heard, and eventually Facebook or Twitter won't be able to silence you.
Yeah. Well, I guess for this sort of concluding section, I guess I'd try to sum up my assessment by saying that I think social media is a good venue or in a good place to start important policy and political conversations, but it's not a good way to actually resolve those cleavages. It's ultimately insufficient. It's an insufficient medium to genuinely engage with the issues that are dividing society. And I did want to mention another book. I mentioned earlier Hillary Clinton's speech in 2010 at Newseum, where she said that internet freedom had to be on America's global foreign policy agenda. And that, I think, really captured the zeitgeist at the time in sort of the first era of social media, when social media was, or rather the internet as a whole, was sort of part of the end of history, that it was going to help democratize the world, that it was going to help empower people in the furthest corners of the world. And I think we're now way past that phase. I think we've seen too many of the downsides of social media. We've grappled with disinformation. As you know, disinformation is also on the sort of the globalist agenda right now. Former President Obama gave a very important speech in April this year about where he said that disinformation is weakening democracy. And I wouldn't be surprised if he uses that argument against this country, by the way. But so I think we're way past the sort of the bullish, heady excitement about social media. I think we should be a lot more realistic when it comes to the potentialities of social media, but also to the downsides. And I did want to mention another very important book, and I'll finish off with this. The Belarusian journalist Evgeny Morozov from Belarus, so he knows a thing or two about being censored, wrote a book in 2011, just shortly after Clinton gave that speech, but in 2011 he wrote The Net Delusion, and that kind of offered the contrary viewpoint to Hillary Clinton's. The Net Delusion is about, is a critique of, for instance, what he calls slacktivism, the idea that engagement on social media, being civically engaged, has it takes no effort. It just takes a click, and that totally vitiates the act of engagement. Because back in the day, in the 60s, when people had to actually be out and in the street demonstrating, because there wasn't social media, people had to sacrifice and even risk being arrested sometimes for standing for an issue. So I think there's a really interesting quote that I want to give from this book that I think really captures the state of mind that we should be having when we address this the issue of social media. He says that, he's talking about Belarus here, and he says, "No angry tweets or text messages, no matter how eloquent, have been able to rekindle the democratic spirit of the masses, who, to a large extent, have drowned in a bottomless reservoir of spin and hedonism created by a government that has read its Huxley." Aldous Huxley. So again, there are way too many downsides, and we shouldn't idealize social media and the potential of social media to resolve social problems. We should be awake to its shortfalls as well.
I agree with what has said, and just one more thing, and I'm also a little bit interested in Peter's opinion in that. I don't know where the future...
I think we need to finish this session right now because we've needed to finish it 2 minutes earlier.
Really?
Yes.
I thought it was 1 hour.
Yes.
We still have 8 minutes,
they
no?
They asked us to finish 10 minutes earlier, so we should have finished it 2 minutes ago. So.
Can I just finish it?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, I don't know where the future will take us, but I also have statistics that around 70% of the people are still watching television, but 20% are still reading the news, so print media, and 43% of the people are sharing news on social media platforms, and every fifth actually make comments on social media platforms. So I just want to point it out that social media is definitely the future, in my opinion. And I'm not saying that ordinary media will disappear, but this is, I think, an interesting thing to think about in the future.
Yes, I would agree. Sorry, I'm going to drive you crazy. I think the only thing that we've really lost, at least if I think of like the UK, is that when people all watch TV, I remember back in the 1970s growing up, you know, essentially shows would get 25, 26 million, and it brought people together. Now, shows are hits if they get 5 or 6 million. Everything is fragmented. And I think social media has certainly helped that. I mean, so I do regret that, if I'm allowed to have a bit of nostalgia.
Thank you all for your answers,
you.
and I hope to continue this conversation after the panel. So thank you all for listening.